good evening. Thank you everyone for being here. So my name is Genjo. That's a Dharma name. You'll notice some people have those. Essentially, that's folks who, I don't know how to say this, you take the precepts for ethical living, something that's tied into this class a little bit, and you sew one of these robes called a raksu, kind of a robe to go in our tradition, and affectionately called a bib sometimes. So folks have been given a Dharma name through the tradition, either by Ejo or another head priest in the tradition. So name is Genjo. If you forget that, ask me again. It can be hard to get Dharma names in because they're unusual to us. And so I'm a novice priest here, which means I'm a monk in training, basically. Ejo, the head teacher here, asks for a 5-year commitment of that training. And how it works in Zen is they throw the robes on you first, and then the training happens. And then so I'm about 4 years into that commitment. I've been practicing Buddhism for about 10 years. I started out here, basically, and slowly got closer and closer into having robes put on me. And so about 4 years into that commitment now, and in October of this year, I'll sort of have my coming of age ceremony. It's a little bit like a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah in Zen, except rather than arguing with God, we sort of argue with each other about the truth. It's a really lively and wonderful ceremony, so sort of mark it. It's October 17th, I believe, for those who are interested. It should be a big affair, like possibly 200 people like flowing out into the garden, maybe 20 people from Japan. It also coincides with Ejo becoming sort of officially the head, what do we call it, the abbot. That's a very particular term in Japanese Zen, the abbot of the temple. He's been the spiritual head of this community for 18 years or so, since its sort of inception. But that's when it sort of marks a sort of, also a coming of age moment for our temple and our community. Yeah, that's about it. And at that point, if I pass, which hopefully I should, I'll be sort of a journeyman monk. I won't be transmitted to be a full monk in this school, but sort of it means something when you go from place to place, and there's technical terminology, and you'll go to the monastery in Japan and be like, so, are you a zagen? You'll be like, no, I'm just an unsui. So anywho, that all has its place, and there'll be some teaching around that before that time comes to sort of invite the community more fully into that.
Genjo, can you explain the distinction between priest and monk in this tradition?
That's a good question. It's mostly, I would say, semantic, the way, I'm not even know if I'm using that word correctly, but that distinction isn't really technical within English. Really, the term is obosan, which means what we translate as monk or priest. Oh. However, in the way I'll use it when I'm using them in a more sharp sense is a monk would be a kind of a spiritual renunciate who has given up, quote unquote, the world. I think we all have an image of what that means. It means like a Catholic monk, for example, no family, just like life purely in the order, not having any other kind of work or profession. Whereas priest, I'm often using to delineate the kind of clerical side of things. So empowered within specific rituals and a tradition. So in a way, if you take up the kind of clerical route and become ordained in this school, you don't have to be a monk. You can be a monk. So Ejo, if we're using those words, he's not a monk. He was a school teacher for 20 years in the Eugene area, and he has a wife and kiddos. So he's kind of out on the giving up the world side of it. But also in the Zen school, there are a number of monks who live in monasteries their whole lives or don't choose to have families. So I really appreciate the Zen school because they say, we need both of those beings. If you want to take that route, great. If you want to have a family and kiddos, great. Bring your whole spiritual gumption to whatever route you choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm oddly sort of like both right now. Sort of given up the world, but haven't really committed to that, just kind of sort of by de facto. And so maybe I'll say a little bit about the temple as well, because I know not everyone who's attending here has been to this place before, and sort of what's going on here. It's nice to sort of have a setting as we undertake this class. And so A number of us live here full time. So Tech Monk Joichi and I were both, ordained. We live here and we're full time here. There are also students who are ordained by Ejo who also have jobs elsewhere, and a couple of folks in the chute, so to speak, to become monks. They're what we call postulants. So they're around also helping make this work. And then there are many folks who have been practicing here for 15, 18 years since the beginning of the temple who are not taking an ordained route, but also kind of have what we would call a kind of ordination. They're sort of official students of Ejo is kind of how we put it. They've sort of said, Zen's my path, I'm choosing to take up leadership here, and Ejo, you're my guy, you're my teacher. And so there are folks who are in that realm, as well as many people who aren't interested in sort of, being a part of the tradition that way, who are still vibrant members of the communities who have chosen not to sort of take this ceremony or be a part of the fold that way. So all sorts of layers. Our goal is, many Zen institutions will have different kind of ways they describe themselves. Some places will be Zendos, so halls of Zen, the places of Zen, and we chose the word temple or Zen community temple. So the idea is we want to have all sorts of walks in life and participation. So please feel welcome to be you in this space. I think this temple's around, I think I mentioned 18 years old or so, and practice here on a daily basis, except for oftentimes Saturdays. That's kind of our day off if there's nothing else to do. But meditation in the mornings, there are these classes. I think most of you have seen kind of our suite of programming we've offered, ceremonies throughout the day. So if you have questions about any of that, just shoot the temple an email, and we're always happy when people want to get more involved, which is a little bit difficult during COVID times, but we've seemed to make it work. So maybe a few nuts and bolts of how we're going to spend time together over these next 6 weeks. First off, if you haven't signed up, and I know there are a number of people who might just be here for just a few classes because they have other commitments or can't be here. But if you're planning to be here for the whole 6-week course, please sign up. We get your email. I'm sending out extra information. If we ever need to cancel class, that's a way we can get a hold of you. So if you could do that, just shoot us an email if that's confusing in any way. There's no charge for this class, and we always mention that the temple is, just vastly, maybe like 93% of our funding is really freely given donations, which holds a special place in my heart because as a poor college student, I attended lots of things and really hardly gave a dime. And it was because of people's generosity that I could do that and be here. And that's also probably why I got the hook in my belly to become a monk. There was some karma there. So if you feel inspired, please feel free to give a donation. And we like to be really bothersome about that by not giving any precise instructions around that. But we sort of put that onus on you and say, well, what's this worth to you? What kind of funds and means do you have available to you right now, and how do you work out a way forward with that? And if you want to talk about them more, we're happy to. So, yeah, Holly?
Where is the donation box?
The donation box.
It's always...
Yeah, so it's in the front here, just near the library, in front of the statue Kuan Yin or Avalokiteshvara. It's sort of tall, standy, and it looks like a bowl. The traditional way that the Buddha received offerings and his early followers, they only received food, they didn't receive any money, and it was in a bowl. And it's kind of an amazing image that whatever people were eating, they put it in. And I heard nowadays that tradition evolved a little bit, that the bowl is very big and it might get given in small portions so that it didn't become one big glob. But then you hear stories of old masters who would be like, that's rubbish, and they'll take everyone's little bowls, put them together and mix it all up, and then dole out the food to monks. Anyway, there's some fun imagery for you.
But the bowl has a slot in it, so the money goes down into a box.
Yeah.
So it's not sitting in the bowl.
Good point. So there will be homework for this class. It's usually pretty light. Actually, there's a fairly significant reading at the end of this class. I'll take that back. But hopefully it's worthwhile to you. And of course, if your life circumstances are such and you can't get to it, that's fine. But I think particularly in this class, They'll feel really alive with the lifeblood of the class. I thought last class they rounded out. Oh, hello.
Hi,
Welcome.
sorry, I'm late.
No worries. Yeah, if you could just take off your shoes and then move and find a spot over here. Welcome.
Where do you want me to put my shoes at?
They could be fine right there.
Okay. Just in the front.
Yeah. Even right there in a cushion would be fine. Yeah. Okay, so homework. There will be some, and also I'll be sending out quite a few extra materials. Feel free to look at these as you wish. I was surprised at how many people seemed to delve into the materials last class, so I think in terms of my own exploration, I stumble upon lots of different things, and I'll lean on the side of just offering those to people, so please, some of the emails can be quite full. Please don't feel overwhelmed, feel free to pick and choose as you like, and to delve in as deeply as you feel inspired. And please attend all classes. And in one sense, I just say that because we all have busy lives, or many of us do, and it can be so easy just to be like, well, I guess I don't have to. This class is free, and it's gonna be fine if I don't go. But so just a little bit extra encouragement to be here, and it can feel the energy in the hall can feel pretty different if there are just like 3 of us after a class this size. So we're all really relying on each other. And it's much easier to open our hearts to something and pay attention to something when we're doing that in community. So please come if you can. And if you feel inspired to shoot me an email, if you can't make it, I actually kind of like it. It's nice to just be like, oh, they're thinking about it and they can't make it. So feel free to do that if you'd like, but it's not required. Zoom. Many of you are here on Zoom. There are a few special rules or considerations that apply to you all. One is that you all can talk. I don't know if you all have this in your consciousness, but we have a setup here where there's, it's quite an amazing setup, if you could only see it. You're basically hooked into speakers, and there are various mics all around. And so you can bop in and ask questions just like everyone else, and be open to sharing. So just so you have that in your consciousness. And also, I can see all of you on the screen right now, and we're trying to cultivate an ethic here at Buddha Eye of our temple Zoom culture, if we could talk about such a thing. But just the hope is that if people come to classes in particular, that if you could have your video on and be seen and really be here, that, as I was just saying, is really supportive to everyone else and provides a kind of feedback and connection that is really important. It makes a really big difference. I remember this last 6-week course, there was a time where I told a joke that I thought everyone should be laughing at, and no one in the hall was laughing, but I saw that almost everyone online was laughing. It was really interesting. So a part of me was like, okay, not totally off the mark. It gave me a little bit of feedback. And it's really different, if that screen is just one black list of names. So thank you for keeping that in mind. And also, if you do need to turn off your camera for any reason, or even a whole class, that's totally fine. You need to do you, and life happens. So thank you. What else do we have? So a bit about the flow of the class. As you can see, people have been chiming in here a little bit, and that's great. And my hope is that this is interactive, and also if it becomes too interactive, we won't get anything done. So there'll be times where I'm pretty good about having a clear idea of how much time I need for something, and how much time it will take, and if I'm kind of open to more questions at a time or not. Especially, a lot of this class, kind of unfortunately, but it's just the nature of the beast, will be me talking at you. But almost always clarifying questions are completely and totally welcome. Just like, that totally didn't land. Could you say that again in another way? Or just like, oh, I didn't quite hear you. Something cut out online or something. Those kinds of things, almost always, if you have that feeling and you voice it, almost always someone else will have the same kind of thing moving through their minds. And so hopefully we will have time for more discussion. And either at the beginning of class, kind of commenting on homework, or at the end of class. But sometimes with the homework, we just won't have time to get to it. So a lot of that is just really for your own digestion and exploration. I think that's it from me. Anyone else have kind of nuts and boltsy questions about how we're going to do this?
When it comes to asking questions, will you try to have like moments like now where you pause and sort of open the floor, or is it okay just to kind of jump in, even if there isn't necessarily an express pause, just like maybe in between seemingly in between a thought?
Yeah, usually during class I'll make times like this, kind of pause and gather and see what's there. And I guess sometimes I'll oftentimes be like, your question's a little bit explanatory and it's wonderful, but it's going to take us in a place that maybe with time-wise, we can't afford right now. So I might just ask to holster it and see if we can get to it at the end. Yeah, does that sort of get at your question? Yeah.
Yeah, perfectly.
Great, thanks, Jake. Okay. Well, maybe before I jump into the material, and today is going to be a day where I'm going to try and get through quite a bit. It's going to be a lot of me talking at you. But before I get into what I was hoping to offer today, just reflect out loud a little bit on the inspiration behind this class and kind of what's going through me I've been spending a couple weeks really reflecting on this topic and wondering where the aliveness is. And so this class is usually offered every spring in preparation for what we call Jukai. I think I might have mentioned that earlier, the ceremony where people will take on the ethical code of our particular school of Buddhism. And in a way, we talk about that as formally, in one sense, declaring this to be your path and kind of moving into that shoot a little bit and having in one sense, this is a marker of something. In another sense, we say this is the Buddha's robe. You're taking on the Buddha's robe, and it has your own particular shape, your stitches in it, maybe the stitches of someone else who's helping you out. But in one sense, it's yours, and it's also the path, and you're marrying those. You're marrying those together in front of a community. And so this class about ethics is usually really, really tied into that ceremony and helping prep people for that or help people discern more about if that's something they really want to get up to or not. I don't know, we have the situation here where we're not going to do that ceremony this spring. So we're a little bit decoupled. This class was a little bit decoupled from that necessity. And so I felt sort of the liberty of not needing to maybe hone in on a few specifics of the tradition so much. But for me, it was really a fun opportunity to be like, ethics? This word sila, which I'll get about. The Buddha said that there are three main aspects of the path, and this is one of them. And it's oftentimes talked about as kind of the, it's a little bit ancillary to the path. Wisdom and meditation, right? That's where the juice is. That's where the real kind of transcendence, man. That's where it's at. But ethics can become just a little bit of a sideshow in a sense. But to really take that on as the center and say, this is just as important, this is just as alive, the feedback loops there and the opportunities for growth and exploration are just as alive and just as vivid. So that for me has been feeling really exciting and hopefully what I want to get at and offer in these 6 weeks. And further in that realm, when many people are considering Jukai or taking the precepts formally in this tradition, they'll oftentimes receive a list of basically 16 or at least 10 injunctions against your behavior. Here are things you should not do. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and then you're through the gate. Really, that's pretty, that's not a sexy sell, right? It's really, if we hear it that way, and there can sometimes be, not very enlivening teaching around this, in my opinion, within our tradition, that it either goes to the side of, yes, take them on, they're kind of absolute, or it can be like, well, you've sort of signed up for the team that doesn't try very hard. You take these on, for example, many people in our school of Buddhism will still drink alcohol. And there's a precept about not drinking alcohol. It says, do not take intoxicants. what do you do with that? Are people just slacking off? Sure, there's undoubtedly some of that. However, you could say also on the other schools, which take very strong prohibitive precepts, you could say, there's plenty of gnarled things that can happen when you take on an injunction and don't allow maybe for any kind of sensitivity or feedback loop there. So I think there's more to be explored here with these precepts that have very strong injunctions and also say, and where are you? Where are you in your path with this? And how can the precept be something that's pointing out, these are arenas that make up a Buddha, someone who has perfectly realized ethical conduct, and how do you become more sensitized to the loop of being pressed up against that and go through authentic transformation rather than just taking a rigid stance or just a dismissive stance. So how do we skillfully navigate into that? And really, hopefully, opening up an alive exploration where ethical living can be about liberation, can be about awakening and freedom, and really be something core to what it means to live a beautiful life. So not a list or not even a list of lists, but also a dynamic and present path that unfolds actively as we engage it. So that's my hope. Tall order for 6 classes, and I've already just blown through half of one, with the nuts and bolts. So another way that the homework and other ways that we're going to be engaging each other will hopefully flesh this out and bring aliveness for us. All right, any outstanding questions before I sort of jump in? Okay, away we go then. So this first class I'm particularly excited about, and it feels a little bit daring because I'm going to speak very little about Buddhism in one sense. I called this talk sort of informally plowing the soil. I think, at least in my own heart and many people I talk with, ethics and the realm of ethics and morality can be a place that's pretty shut down and pretty calcified and pretty tight in many ways. And I think, I'm speaking, I guess, broadly for Americans here. There's a cultural stream that really contributes to that we're all a part of. And so ethics can feel like a disconnected and abstract word to me. Morality sort of makes me feel gross in my stomach, like someone's just gonna tell me what to do and judge me. That's like, as soon as I hear the word morality, that kind of slight tinge of, ugh, I don't really want to be there, comes to me. And further, it's interesting to reflect that after sort of maybe middle school or high school, if you're lucky in a good community in high school, we receive pretty much no in further instruction in ethical life. There are very few arenas in the public world where that's an acceptable thing to be cultivating, except if you become a criminal, right? Then it's like, well, you messed up. Now we have the right to tell you what's up. So I think that's just an interesting thing to know within our culture. Whereas, I lived in Japan for a chunk of time. There's kind of a broad esteem for spiritual leaders and for ethical conduct. And, not everywhere, but there's this kind of warm, wholesome respect for ancient traditions that offer something. So recognizing that we're in a particular cultural place. And hopefully I want to stir that up a bit and bring some air into the soil. So to start, this word ethics, right, just to get on the same page of that, is a science or systematic approach to understanding good, bad, right, and wrong. Morality, pointing a little bit to the individual practice of, practice is the wrong word, behaviors, ways of being that come from a sort of ethical posture and ethical reasoning or consideration. And I found that, I wrote this talk, and as I was writing this talk further, I didn't really use the word morality often. I would use the word values. So I think I won't be using that word very often. This word values is pointing to that. Where's the place that I see value, and how does that connect to my own understanding of ethics? And these words I'll often use pretty interchangeably throughout this course. And so, in starting to plow the soil a bit and offer different frames and perspectives to loosen up and invigorate what may be calcified and hardened ground, I first want to just mention, I've already been pointing at this a little bit, that we're inheriting a particular cultural, ethical stream. And that I think everyone can already summon up many, many narratives of that, right? We have a beloved constitution. We come from a Puritan people that escaped tyranny by religiosity at some point, and were free to establish the rights of free people. And we're in this stew of ideas and lenses that comes from particular cultural, religious, evolutionary flow. And so these really ancient kind of streams of ethical consideration come to us through law. They come to us through religion. And I'd also say a really prominent one for almost all Westerners and probably everyone around the world now is the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution. That was also really, a scientific, cultural, spiritual kind of revolution. And so I thought I would talk more about that, but I think everyone pretty much gets that picture broadly. But I think I always tend to pitch towards the I'm here and I'm just another being and I want to understand the absolute. And we're all touching that, right? We're all there as people. And I think that's probably a very American, probably also white man thing to think. And so these streams are all divine. Wherever we are in these streams of identity and culture and history, these are defining our eyes as we're approaching our values, as we're approaching ethics. And then I'll further posit, just sort of in there, that there are two sort of, I guess, maybe a little bit archaic streams of ethical thought, that there's ethical objectivity, that there's kind of unmoving, static ethics that are true for everyone all the time. And I'm going to say I don't think that's true, and that's not how I'm going to talk about ethics. And then also the side that says, well, it's just ethical subjectivity. It's just your own, you could, as long as you really believe them and you're true to them, that there can be ethical frameworks that are valid and good. And I think that's not also true. But what we're going to be exploring, I think, and in terms of, this works well with Buddhist thought, that there are things that are universal, ever-present, pervasive, that are true for everyone. But there's also a vital part that it has to do with time, place, culture, your own being, where you are in life in one moment or another, that's totally alive at the same place. And really, that's why this can be such a dynamic and alive conversation, and the key to it being a path of real growth and transformation. So, that's the first one I was going to offer. A cultural, particular lens, place and time, super vital and important when we start moving into ethics. Second, I wanted to talk about ethics, and I already pointed at this a bit, that there's something undefinable, ungraspable, but also immanent, pervasive, real, and defining within the category of ethics, within ethical behavior, ethical consideration. And I want to give kind of a fun image or example of something that sort of functions in this way in our life that we all have some familiarity with. And that example is of irrational numbers or imaginal numbers. How many people have a sense of what that is, as I say that? Cool. So one of them is pi, the number pi, which, did I write it down? Yeah, I wrote down a good number of decimal points. 3.141592653589793, and it goes on forever. That decimal point actually doesn't stop, right? So there's a way, and it's not corporeal and solid and something that we can know completely. And yet it does something very functional that we're all familiar with, or at least you were at one point, you might have forgot, but it helps you find the area of a circle. So pi r squared, right? It's this defining function that will always help you discover or elucidate the area of a circle. And there's a bunch of other ones. There's the square root of 2, which apparently, I think I have this right. Correct me. Matthew, you look like you know what you're talking about.
I used to.
Oh, okay. So the square root of 2, it somehow helps you, I think, find the length of a hypotenuse in a right triangle. The hypotenuse is the long one.
Yeah.
2 are short. So another one is this word, or this number I, which is the square root of -1. So right, 1 times 1 is 1. -1 times 1 is 1. No, it's -1.
Negative 1.
Yeah, but it's not a square root. There it is. You can see I'm a little rusty on my mathematics. And -1 times -1 is 1. But, you know, in quantum mechanics, apparently this number, this imaginal number, you need it to make certain quantum mechanics work. And it explains something, and its effects are really actual and necessary to mathematics and the kind of science of mathematics behind things we enjoy and appreciate and enter our lives all the time. So I think that's kind of a wild thought just to stay with, but I think that the same thing, it's kind of a similar thing that's happening with ethics. These values, this transcendent but sort of ephemeral nature of values that we love, like friendship, loyalty, honesty. We can't, you know, we're never going to get it. We're never going to get a rule that just totally elucidates everything we should ever do in the realm of telling the truth or not, right? There's all these, you know, can you lie to a Nazi if they're at your door if there's a Jew in your house, you know, right? There's all these funny ways that these kind of, I think sometimes little soulless ethics word games can try and like point that out. But just to own that from the beginning, that ethics and the realm of ethics, you know, we can't see it directly, but it defines our phenomenal world in a concrete and ever-present way. People sort of jiving with that? I don't know. Mathematics, remembering math might be kind of traumatizing for some people. So sorry if you're in that category. So next I want to talk about ethics as inherently spiritual, right? Sometimes we can think that ethics, I think, it can be, I don't know what the right word is, simply practical, or just a way to like better felt well-being, more a sense of well-being in our life. But that thinking about ethics as the kind of vibrant location of self and other. It has this very immanent self. I sort of have images and ideas of I kind of know what I am, I'm feeling what I'm feeling. But then there's the other. There's this other person that I see in front of me, and who I can't know. Sarah showed up while I was doing yoga here, and I was like, oh, my friend. I had all these ideas. I know my friend, but then, you know, we talk for a little bit. It's like, oh, I don't know what's going on with your life. And that's just on a very surface level, right? And actually, further, that extends to my own being as well. I have all these ideas of what I am. I really can't find the edge of that either. And so this location of boundary of self and other. I wrote a little, when I was kind of playing around with presenting ethics, I wrote a little definition that ethics as the living sphere of experience where individual action and intention reveals and is contained by the profound interdependence of all living beings and concrete things. Yeah, Matthew.
Can you read that again?
Ethics as the living sphere of experience where individual action and intention, it both reveals and is contained within the profound interdependence of all living beings and concrete things. So you'll notice that last bit, especially those of you who are in the last class I taught, that's, you know, shooting at that term we studied a lot, emptiness, no self, you know, these teachings of being like totally ungraspable. And then another side of that, you know, to frame that a little more positively, is I am time beings. I am time beings. my fullness totally extends out in a way that's ungraspable and unknowable. And further, the many moods and states of experience I have, we had been working with a framework of no self as actually many selves. That I am innumerable beings flowing through my own karmic stream right here and right now. I don't have to separate that out to being just me and just you. Actually, I'm changing so much all the time. And who was that 7-year-old Genjo? How could I find them? And yet, something is connected and something's still here. I had said this in my last class. Reality as a seamless flow of materiality and heart. That somehow, wildly, my intention reveals that to me and is contained within it. The Buddha, when he woke up, his first words after attaining enlightenment in Buddhist mythology was, I, together with all beings in the great earth, attain to the way at one time. You can see all the lines of similarity. I, me, this being, together with all beings, the great earth, at one time, attain to the way. So to extend this a little bit further, there was a French philosopher I stumbled upon who I really liked, and I'll share a few words of. He was born in the early 20th century, Emmanuel Levinas. And I'll just talk a little bit about, I have a few phrases from his philosophy around ethics, and just kind of talk at you about that. For Levinas, the irreducible relation, the epiphany of the face-to-face, the encounter with another, is a privileged phenomenon in which the other person's proximity and distance are both strongly felt. Face-to-face, encounter with another, it's a privileged phenomenon. I don't know quite what he means by privilege. That's a curious word. In which the other person's proximity and distance are both strongly felt. So the proximity, I think of that a little bit as the closeness, the realization that you're just as valid as I am. You have a consciousness, you have a face, you have wants, and that's just like mine. I have that too. And the distance, that might not be what I want. That might not, I don't look like you, we're different. That we chant something here in the morning every other day called the harmony of difference and sameness. And Levinas pointing to that, like right directly in ethics, just the realization that there are other beings just as valid as I am, and totally different at the same time. He goes on, the other precisely reveals herself in her alterity, their difference, not in a shock negating the I. It doesn't take me away, but as the primordial phenomenon of gentleness. Really interesting words, the primordial phenomena of gentleness. I wonder what the French word is. I wonder if that could be a clunky translation. But I feel like he's pointing out the, not that it negates what I'm feeling, but what shows up is the opportunity of touch. What's revealed is that we're pressed against each other, and my basic realization that you're there and you're different. Before I have any choice about that, any feelings, the fact is that we're touching. We're touching. It's intimate. It's intimate. And he says, at the same time, the revelation of the face makes a demand. This demand is before one can express or one can know one's freedom to affirm or deny. So that touches first. It illuminates our connection and difference, placing profound import on my actions before anything else in our experience. Really pointing to the phenomena of emptiness we've been looking at, but really in a more ethical lens, that arises as soon as I meet another being. He goes on, subjectively, Levinas argued, subjectivity is primordially ethical, not theoretical. That is to say, our responsibility for the other is not a derivative feature of our subjectivity, but instead it founds our subjective being in the world by giving it a meaningful direction and orientation. So that was a lot. I had to read that like 6 times, like having it in front of me. And I'll actually send this out to people who are interested. But really they're pointing that others are the direct cause of finding self, that they arise together. Really, oftentimes we so quickly take the self as first and then the discovery of other, but really that those are arising together. And then further, that mechanism, that orientation, it provides the meaningful and direction and orientation of subjective being itself. So I think there, how I phrase that in my mind, it's at the very beginning is the sort of root and cause of liberation and suffering. That there's kind of a purchase on my heart by just another's face. And I think that's why, for me, for example, I'm so challenged by the presence of people who are unhoused. That when I just see someone, I have a response. There is a response within me. It's necessitated. I can't choose not to respond. Choosing not to respond is a kind of response. As soon as there's a recognition, I have a sense that there's a need there. I have a sense that there's a need. Right? So he goes on, this is the last bit, for those of you who are not philosophy lovers. There's not so much of this. He has a thesis that ethics are a first philosophy. So he says, by means of the traditional philosophical pursuit of knowledge, which is secondary to a basic ethical duty to the other. And then he throws a wild one in there, which is to meet the other is to have the idea of infinity. To meet the other is to have the idea of infinity. That I really have no idea where he's shooting at. Yeah. So our primary orientation as being individuals, the primary orientation as being an individual is our smooshed upness against other people. Smooshed, totally smooshed as a consciousness, touching the consciousnesses? Conscious eye? The conscious eye of other beings. And they're just as authentic and real as myself. Isn't that fun? I can see people who are not having fun, so we'll move on from that. But I think it's beautiful pointing out the inherently spiritual nature that we can look at with ethics and just the realization that there's another being. And also, I thought about parenting, how becoming a parent could be so profound that there's just a child, screaming or crying or laughing, and that has just deep purchase on you. And I think it awakens us to that in a way that maybe we've learned to become a little bit blind to, or think it's too much to bear, that as I meet people, I have ethical responsibility to them all the time. And so further, with that, partially stemming from that philosophy, ethics as concerned with responsibility. You know that line, what's your ethical responsibility? What's my ethical responsibility? And so that can sound like an ethical demand in a sense, which I think it is, and maybe that philosophy is pointing to that. But I wanted to shift that around into saying ethics as ability to respond, that it's a response ability. So concerned with ethical sensitivity and deepening and cultivating. I called this class, Cultivating an Ethical Life. So I think we can become so quickly stymied by the idea that a demand is placed upon me. And maybe I really think that's true. But I think maybe in our own spiritual life, in our own growth, that our goal should not be getting caught too tightly in any particular demand, but really learning about the soil of our ability to respond and produce ethically viable choices in the world, and not just to shut something down or become too tight around something. I think we can so easily go to either one of those, and they can shut off inquiry and shut off growth and shut off really lively exploration. And so here, this has a nice correlation back to that idea of the irrational numbers. You can always get a more perfect circles. The more perfect circle, the more decimal points you use. So if you start at 3.14, that lops off a whole bunch of specificity for the further decimal places of pi. And so I think a really alive ethical being is just able to move more deeply into the specificity of ethics. I think further, this lines up well with the class we had before in talking about that I have many kinds of intention within me at one point. How do I start to realize that maybe just being kind, for example, if I have strong value in that, maybe I have to come to a point where realizing being kind might just be selfish in some ways. It might just be about wanting someone to like me rather than speaking truth and trying to help my friend, even if that means conflict. That'll look like standing up to someone. It'll look like them maybe not wanting, not liking me as much anymore, not wanting to spend time. But so this place of thinking about ethics as continued sensitivity to the feedback loops of ethics and ethical responsibility, that this is what we're trying to cultivate. That's sensitivity. And I think I'm going to be returning to that idea again and again, that it's about sensitivity, about cultivating something, not just getting the right answers, right? So next, ethics as involved in beauty, imagination, and nobility. I think with ethics, it's easy to become reductive, fear-based, and dull. And we can use pretty closed logical loops to assess our living and to live through a bound heart that only sees this and that. And this whole exploration just really shuts off. And so inviting in a conception of ethics that's intuitive, it's aesthetic, it's uplifting and open to possibility. So one example from that, many of us, people who have been studying here at the temple, will have heard about the Diamond Sutra. That's a teaching or a kind of sacred teaching from the Buddha within our particular school, many other schools of Buddhism. And the teaching it starts out with the story that one of the Buddha's disciples, he watched the Buddha just like sort of go through a day. The Buddha woke up in the morning after, I guess he was sitting meditation, and he woke up, he walked into the town with his alms bowl, he got some food, he came back, he ate it, he washed his feet, he put his bowl aside, and he sat up for meditation. And Subhuti was just blown away by his straightforwardness and simplicity and calmness of heart and vibrancy of spirit. And so he asked the question, he basically said, "I'm so lucky to know you. You're so great. How do I be like you?" His exact words were something like, "How do I stand? How do I walk? How do I control my thoughts?" He said, what's your diet? Do you do yoga? What are you doing to live like this? Like, I want the plan. And the Buddha didn't give him a plan. The Buddha said, "You're right, Subhuti, I am pretty great." He said something like that. And he said, if you want to live like this, you have to give rise to the thought. Give rise to the thought that no matter what beings you encounter, what shape, what size, and it goes on this big, long description, whether they're born from a womb, whether they're born from the air, which, that's a fun, for those in the last class, that's referring to heavenly beings. They're born spontaneously in the air. Womb, air, egg, or water, whether you're born from any of these ways, whether you look good or bad or nice or whatever it is, give rise to the thought that you will liberate all of them. You'll free all of them. You will become free with all of them. And in doing so, you don't free a single being, because they're actually already you. That's part of what actually happens with the freeing, is not seeing them outside or inside, right? That word emptiness, that no self. No self is no self because there's all self. Sorry, that might be a bit much. But this place of, that requires tremendous imagination, right? It's not a diet plan, it's not an exercise, it's not a logarithm. It's an inspirational, aspirational heart that meets beings in a particular way. And I found a quote that I liked, where a guy said something, to explain this really terribly. I'm reading a man named James Hillman pretty often. He's a post-Jungian psychologist, mythologist, who I really enjoy. And he was speaking about where to look in a culture to make it alive. And he's talking about investigating the backward places. And I think actually that lines up really well with what we're doing in meditation practice, actually, for those of you who dabble in that arena. So I'll just read this, and we'll go from there. So nursing and sitting with it, dwelling upon it, tracing the invisible mystery in it, letting compassion come for your own chronic disorder. I think that's a great synonym for often meditation practice, chronic disorder. This all slows down your progress. It moves you from future thinking to essential thinking about our nature and character, upon life's meaning, upon death's, upon love and its failure, upon what is truly important, and upon the small things in words, manners, act, necessitated by the limitations of your inescapable disorder. We begin to hear differently, watch differently, absorb more sensitively. Confronted with the unbearable in my own nature, I show more trepidation, which is, after all, the first piece of compassion. In regard to others, my manners alter, my language more attuned and precise. I become more sophisticated and artful. As the cat steps, a bird perceives, a dog follows invisibles in the air. I look to arts for understanding, to ritual for enactments, and to the lives of men and women of the past and how they came through. I need something further than community and civilization, for they may be too human, too visible. I need imaginal help from tales and images, idols and altars, and the creatures of nature to help me carry what is so hard to carry personally and alone. I think that just, as I read that, I was like, oh, yes. That there's something for many of us who are sitting and facing the wall or practicing meditation as you will and trying to understand something about my own being. There's an inability to dominate myself, to be the shape I'd really like to be. I can't inflict or move around the beings as I sometimes think I can. The beings which flow through me. And so this kind of ethical posture, this spiritual heart shifting within us, it's so wrapped up in insighting into our own nature and how we meet other people. I think they're really inseparable. And I think that's a perspective that's hard to get when just kind of thinking about ethics and speaking and thinking about wisdom and sort of spiritual insight and great meditation posture. But I think they're really intertwined. And I'm looking for an excuse to type that out, so I'll type that out and send it to people. And really, I think it's so easy to get reductive and we want to follow the line. I think for many of us, it's our Puritan upbringings, that there's something about the comfort of knowing what's right and just being able to enact it, rather than entering that chronic disorder of my own heart and letting my sensitivity move into all the tendrils of my intention and my being. So the last thing I want to offer is to talk about ethics as a path of awakening and liberation, which I wrote here requires my conscious participation, but I would like to say that it would be, it's here and laid out before I really get to make a choice about it. Like when I encounter someone, right? There's purchase on my heart before I get to have any idea about what to do with that or not. So this path, there's a nice phrase in Buddhism that the path is already under your feet. Path is already under your feet. So to talk further about this, you've all been dying to see what's under here. I drew a little diagram.
I thought it was gonna cut somebody off or something.
Isn't that fun? So here, this is really me just playing around the imagination and trying to feel into my own felt sense of what's going on and how can ethical sensitivity have anything to do with waking up, and how can it be a path? How can it be an alive exploration? So, can people see this relatively okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People online, thumbs up. You see it a little bit? And I'll take a...
What's that top red word
Yeah,
on the
kids
right?
This one?
Not there, on the other side.
The other one says faith.
Okay.
So I'll just explain a little bit of my vision behind this quickly, and then just invite people to, part of the homework is gonna be to make your own, or mess with mine. Find somewhere, feel in your own, there's innumerable, as I was doing, I was like, oh, that's all wrong. That can't be right. Or there's so important modifiers here or there, feedback loops. So intention or action, this is the word oftentimes, so the word karma, right? Action, that's what that word means. And by the way, we're really far away from most traditional Buddhist teaching right now. I wanted to write a disclaimer yeah, be careful. We'll spend more time with Buddhist concepts and how all this can relate, and draw more maps that are specifically related to this tradition and other Buddhist traditions. But in the realm of imaginal and play right now, we have intention, action related to karma, and then this word value right here. You have this related to awareness, that we're always, no matter what, if we're doing something, we have an idea it has value to some degree or not. And putting the connection there. And then here, this is moving over from the value to truth and law. That's pointing at that transcendent, universal aspect of connectedness with other beings that I can't see directly. I can't see that or know that directly. I can have values that point at it. And so I put this little line here. I'm calling that kind of belief. I have some traction on this value. I believe it's gonna be good. Trickle down economics are gonna save the economy, right? I believe that's gonna work. Faith, I think, is this piece that I think is really important, is where we don't get stuck in belief. We don't get stuck on just having purchase on the idea of our value and thinking that it's gotta stay that way. This has gotta be the right way. But realizing that value will connect up with whatever is true, whatever my intention is pointing at, it'll connect up with something that's true. And I have faith that that meaning is there. And then further, from here, the truth and law connecting back with making a choice, that there's some kind of feedback. There's a way that I'm touched and have connection with what's really true. And so I put up here, there's a little word right here, ease, and below that is dis-ease. I think many people will, there's, maybe one of the most central teachings in Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is that there's difficulty in life, there's suffering, and that has a cause, and that there's such a thing as ease and liberation and joy and nirvana. And that has a cause, and that cause is path. Right, so we'll explore that a little more later. But really pointing back here that there's a feedback loop that I can become sensitive to. I can feel into it. And that can help me make a better choice. I can become more in tune and harmonized with this. And further, where this gets real fun, is that almost all the time our intention has aspects of wholesomeness and unwholesomeness would be traditional words to talk about karmic intention. And that, imagine there's 45 different arrows pointing to slightly different values, and those are all meeting something true, and we're getting a feedback loop through that. So how do we start to move into this and discard more and more subtle pieces of values that actually aren't serving us, right? So for me, I'm all about friendliness, and that has real drawbacks. It's part of my real exploration as a priest right now, that you just can't make everyone happy all the time. And if you place, really, I like that value. I think it does a lot of good and creates a lot of connection and has a great utility in the world. But if I'm not sensitive on how it actually creates disharmony, it doesn't really help someone, right? It might just be self-serving in this limited way. If I don't become sensitive to that, I'll never know. Never know. Then, right in the center, I put self. I wish I could sort of draw a circle around the whole thing and put self. That this is actually a uniform process of my being that's happening all the time, whether I'm aware of it or not, whether I have sensitivity or not. I would say something like this is happening within us all the time. And folks will maybe see some similarities between this and the wheel of life and the sort of interdependent link of the 12-link dependent chain of origination. We'll see how that might link up with this in certain ways and have fun playing with that. So those are my efforts to plow the field of ethical consciousness. And as I said, the homework, play with something like this, have fun with it, feel into what needs to be there. You might have more room to add all sorts of fun modifiers on there, what feels alive for you. My roommate actually asked me, he said, where do you feel like you are right now? I was like, oh, I didn't ask that question. And so I said value. I'm hanging out with attention to my values. What is that? How do I have connection with them? And I said, where are you? He said, oh, I'm in the feedback. I'm learning how to receive feedback and learn from something. I was like, oh, that's nice. So all sorts of ways to play and open ourselves up to this. So I'll real quickly introduce the other piece of homework I have. Genjo, the head teacher here, a couple of years ago, he gave a formal teaching. It's called a teisho in our tradition. So many of you may have seen his Dharma talks on Sunday, which can be fairly casual. He'll make you laugh now and again, be sort of playful and explanatory and go on sort of tangents now and again. A teisho, on the other hand, has the meaning of being a teaching from Zazen to Zazen. So Zazen is the term for meditation in our particular school. So from the meditative heart, mind, consciousness to someone trying to meet reality very directly with their being. And so we have a transcript of this teisho on sila, or this is the Sanskrit word, I believe, for ethics. And it'll take maybe 30 minutes to read through, but it's really wonderful, I think. He's also my teacher, so I kind of have to say that. But I do think it's really wonderful. So I'll send that out to everyone in an email. So read that, and we'll probably start out class next time with people bringing out a few thoughts about that. And then next class we'll explicitly delve into, actually let me check my schedule. Yeah, we'll delve into really foundational Buddhist teachings that relate to ethics. And last piece of homework, especially if I don't know you, please email me a few sentences about your life, path, inspiration, connection to the temple. I'd really appreciate that. It helps me have my feelers into the class and what people are looking for and what they're excited about, and just creates further connection. And if I know you, you can do that too. So feel free to say hi. Maybe we have time for one comment or question if people would like. Well, it's fairly late and we can call it a wrap. How we close every kind of Dharma class at Buddha Eye is we'll say the Pali refuges, which happen to be the very first, the refuges are the first three things you sort of agree to in receiving the precepts. But I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, I take refuge in Sangha. So this is said in Pali, and it's said with particular tonation. So just follow along and then feel free to belt it out once you're relatively close.